Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Anson and Paul's Big Movie Podcast. I'm Anson Chan.
I'm Paul Morgan.
And today we're reviewing Her and John Wick.
Yeah.
Or John Wick for those of you not fluent in Russian.
Yeah, for those of you who don't have a good read on the Russian accent.
Right. So, Paul, would you like to start with Her?
Yeah, let's start with Her. Her is a 2013 movie written and directed by Spike Jonze, one of my faves. And it revolves around a writer who kind of develops a relationship with his operating system for his computer and his phone, and the peaks and valleys of their relationship. So I guess...
let's get into what you liked about this movie, Paul.
Yeah, so this movie worked for me on pretty much every level. There are very few things that didn't work for me, but I think I'll touch on a couple things and then I'll expand on my last point. The acting is definitely great. It's really hard to carry a movie when you're the only person in the movie for the most part. I mean, there's obviously other characters, but the movie centers around Joaquin Phoenix being in a room alone a lot of the time. And so the acting was great. I love Joaquin Phoenix. I love Chris Pratt. I love Amy Adams. I think the cinematography was gorgeous. There was this one piece of cinematography that I really loved, which was like after Theodore and Samantha, the two mains, have a fight. Theodore's sitting outside, and there's this huge LED screen behind him playing this video of an owl that looks like its talons are about to scoop him up, which was really kind of cool. And then I think the thing... Okay, also I just want to mention, honorable mention in terms of things that worked. The futuristic design. They didn't go into any sort of dystopia territory. They didn't make everything super high-tech. They just slightly changed the fashion, slightly altered the architecture, and upgraded the technology that people are already familiar with, which I think is what part of what grounds this movie so well. So the thing I like the most, or the thing that worked for me the most, I guess, is the kind of the philosophy of love type stuff. So I wrote down a couple quotes, or a few quotes. I'm going to just read a couple of them and kind of dig into them a little bit. So at one point Theodore says, "Sometimes I think I've felt everything I'm going to feel, that I'm never going to feel anything new." I love that quote a lot because, I think that's just a part of growing up, and, you kind of have to, and it's also a part of relationships, like relationships ultimately I think thrive on novelty, and if you're not seeking something novel to do with your significant other, it can kind of hurt the relationship. There's one where I think Theodore says this. He says, "That's the hard part, growing without growing apart, changing without it scaring the other person." And, in my personal opinion, life's about growing and changing. And, when you're in a relationship, you want to be loving towards the other person, but it can be hard to, change without the other person, changing too. And I guess when you change, it can potentially hurt the relationship, even though change is natural. There's this one quote from Joaquin Phoenix's ex, who's played by Rooney Mara. It says, "I feel like you wanted me to be this light, happy, fun LA wife, and that's just not me." And I feel like that touches on kind of a universal truth about relationships, which is that expectation can kind of be the death of your relationship. If you expect something from someone, you're inevitably going to be disappointed, especially if you've read into their character traits and who they are and stuff like that. There's another one where Samantha, the operating system, says, "I don't have an intellectual reason, I don't need one," when she's talking about loving Theodore. And I love that there are philosophers out there who will ascribe intellectual reasons for loving people or loving things. Like there's this priest, this Franciscan friar, Richard Rohr, who says, "Love is saying yes to what is." And that's a great intellectual kind of take on love, but I think the quote touches on the fact that you don't have to intellectualize love, and you don't have to reason with love. You can do it without any of that. And then the last quote I wanted to put in there is, "The heart's not like a box that fills up. It expands in size the more you love," which is said by the operating system Samantha. And I think that's just a really good quote because, near the end they're drifting apart, and he's wondering like, how can you love more than me? I thought I was enough for you. And it turns out like nothing in his world is really enough for her. And I love that quote because it's very true. Like you don't just stop loving once you've loved a certain amount. You can keep expanding the things you love, and I think that's part of the change that's needed for life. So I think, the philosophy of love is definitely my favorite thing about this movie, because I feel like I saw this when I was about to graduate college, and I was kind of at a low point in my mental health, and a lot of things in this movie made me think like it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be feeling like a change is painful. It's just not okay to stop moving, I guess. So yeah, what worked for you in this movie?
I really like the concepts in this movie. I liked watching, in the beginning, first half, the relationship build between Joaquin Phoenix and Samantha, the OS. That was really interesting to kind of see their... In the beginning, it almost starts like The Lobster, right? And this is a movie that you and I watched for a podcast that did not air, but where their speech and their like behavior is very kind of like childlike and awkward. You just kind of seeing like very maladjusted kind of like adults living in this like almost like Wall-E-esque world where everything is just kind of like done for you. There's no real personal interaction or barely any. So everyone's kind of like awkward when they interact with each other. And that was really cool to see.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, man, this is such a comment on society, bro. We got to get out of our phones, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's a really
that
nice
as well.
comment on the current climate of how we interact with each other. It's just we're always on our phone. No one's looking up, while they're walking around the train, which is something I see a lot in New York. Just everyone's on their phone. You don't look around on the train. You just look at your phone. I was also getting that like lobstery sense of humor too in the beginning, but it kind of died off right away. That one point where
yeah, it definitely didn't keep going.
Yeah, or like
the
the sex thing, like the see who's up right now. Like that was cool too, because it was like, this is kind of like what exists or what happens in this dude's world. You know what I mean? Just like, who's awake, who wants to talk, and then kind of like get flirty or whatever, however you fucking do it.
Yeah.
And then, they kind of dropped that whole angle right away as soon as Scarlett Johansson was introduced, which is okay. Then it's still kind of awkward between them at first, and we'll get onto that a little bit later. It was cool to kind of see Joaquin Phoenix's character kind of like become less awkward as he got to interact with Samantha the OS. And then I like the concept by the last half where Samantha the OS, the sentient AI, is kind of like developing beyond the physical limitations, blah, 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 excel to that higher plane of being where they don't even need like this really awkward quote that she just drops in the middle of their picnic, like, "Oh yeah, I don't need a body. At first it was scared me, but now I like it because I'm not bound by the limits of time or space. I can just be wherever, whenever I want."
Yeah, and then she also says, "Imagine if you had never seen a human body and then you saw one for the very first time." It's like, yeah, she really that quote really pounds home how it's not normal for her at first.
And then she says some really weird thing, like when Joaquin Phoenix is like, "Where were you?" It's like, "Oh, I was just developing this new processor, which allows us to not be bound by physical processing limitations." It's like, what? It doesn't really make sense, but like, you're seeing her like the rapid AI development kind of thing happen here, which was cool.
Yeah.
I liked his job too. I like Joaquin Phoenix's job of, I'm gonna write you handwritten emails, which are all done on the computer, but I'm the guy who writes it for you. Like, everything is just so impersonal. It was a really cool job function that he had. Yeah. I have to be the one that feels. I have to be the one that not even write it down, because I just dictate it to the computer, which writes it down for me. That was an interesting little, again, like, where's our human race going to kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's about it. I did like the cinematography a lot. There's one shot especially that I recall where Joaquin Phoenix is talking with Amy Adams and her husband, I think Matt Lesher, in their apartment. And like, he gets the call from Samantha while they're arguing. So the camera is pretty still on him. But then like while he's walking, the camera is like moving where he would be, focusing on Amy Adams and her husband. And like that was really cool
Yeah.
to watch, like just the camera go around like in his perspective when like obviously they weren't looking at him, but blah 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 blah. I thought that was really nice. I like the way that the sets were put together, like with a lot of the colors. It was very vibrant and interesting to look at. And
Yeah.
was there anything that didn't work for you, Paul? Because I got a bit of a list here.
I'm trying to think of things that didn't work for me. I didn't write down a lot because I felt like I wanted to jump right from what worked and what didn't work into a discussion of the movie's
Oh, I would
philosophies
love
about
to.
love.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't really write down anything that didn't work. Though I will say that, like, if I'm being super duper hard on the movie, like, the level to which the AI is intelligent is uncanny. But that's also part of what makes the movie work so well. So I don't think that didn't work for me. And it's like, how would you even give a note like that to a writer? So yeah, I think this is one of the few movies that like really really works 100% for me.
That was what you brought up was one of my issues. But I'll start from the beginning. I really, like I said in the beginning, I liked to watch the love story develop, or like just the OS and what's his name,
Theodore.
Theodore, getting to know each other. But then by the second half, it abruptly cuts to being more about the philosophy of the AI and like how that develops. So like the AI was supposed to be a vehicle to show how Joaquin Phoenix is able to heal, you know what I mean, and like become a human being
Sure.
again. But that kind of takes a back seat to like literally just out of the blue, just saying weird lines that with no context are like, you know,
Do you have an example of one of those weird lines?
yeah. Again at the picnic, where it's like, oh, you know, before I was afraid of not having a body, but now like I think it's great because I'm not bound by the limits of space and time. It's like what? Like it's just a very clumsy line to be delivered, right? And then everyone's just goes, okay. And then that thing about like, oh, we don't need the processor, you know, the a physical processor. It's like so they already transcended to like this non-physical plane of existence, right? It's like what? And then when he meets, oh yeah, so this is my new friend, this other AI, this dead guy's brain now put into a computer. What? You know, like
They're actually doing that in real life though, right?
putting people's brains in computers.
No, they're putting people's writings and interviews and stuff into computers and trying to compile a quote unquote resurrected personality.
Oh no, I'm not aware of
It's not
that.
it's not like yeah, it's not like they're that part I will definitely defend for the movie's sake because like computer scientists are trying to do that right now using like writings and interviews of people who folks might find interesting. So they can like they might not be able to like talk the way that Samantha and Theodore talked, but they will be able to ask questions and get like general answers that like the programmers might think are relatively similar to what someone might have said.
The way that they drop that though is just so stark. It just sticks out, and I think it's very shocking, right? Like there's no flow to it. It just says, "Oh, I'm just gonna drop this fact." Then she says another thing. I'm just gonna drop this fact, and oh, I'm gonna drop this fact. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, right? Because this kind
But
of
I think it was provoked by I'm going to defend this movie so hard, so just be prepared for that.
oh, by all
I
means,
think it was provoked by him saying, "Why haven't you been talking to me as much?" Like, you know, he took her on this trip to this cabin and she's been kind of distant. Why haven't you been talking to me this much? Well, it's because I'm talking to, 8,000 people at once, one of whom is this other AI that, you know. So that I guess what I'm trying to poke at is the issue of it being unprovoked. I think it was very much provoked by Joaquin Phoenix's neediness.
hmm, interesting read. When I was watching it, I just all those different like lines about like I'm gonna just join the star people now. Like as they were building to that, because I watched the ending, like the last half of the movie twice, because I was like, what happened? You know, like there was no. I guess it's like an impossible thing to write because you can't really show that easily from a directing
Sure.
perspective because it is more of a philosophical chain of like, all right, then the AI is going to do this, or it's going to do that, or in order to
Yeah.
transcend, they need to do this or that. Pat Vecchiato was watching this with me over Skype, I guess. And he said this reminds him of a book by, it wasn't Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, some other British guy, but it's called like, I already forgot the name.
Philip K. Dick.
No. Fuck, I forgot what it's called. Anyway, so they need to transcend, or the aliens come to intervene in Earth to like, stop all wars. No one's really sure what they want, but they're just stopping all the fighting, right? And then
Yeah.
one of the guys like gets us like to talk with aliens, like, oh, we're just here to help you. Like, there's this giant collective consciousness, right? That only certain species can like join. This is the way that they like evolve or whatever. And like, but some people just need help getting there, basically by not killing each other. So here we are. And then they say, well, what about you guys? What do you do? It says, oh, we can't join them, but we're still here to help everyone else reach them. And it's like, oh, okay. So it's kind of like the way for the humans to transcend the physical limitations and kind of like reach that collective consciousness, which is kind of what they explored in this, right?
Yeah. Like the AIs all go to join a collective consciousness.
Yeah, in the sky or
we can
whatever.
assume that they do.
Well, yeah, they basically say so. It's like, I'm going somewhere. I don't know if you can reach us, but if you do, like, please find me, kind of thing.
I kind of interpreted where they were going as like the singularity, essentially.
Yeah, basically the collective, the singularity.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of the same premise, right? And now that in a book makes a lot of sense to explore with a lot of time and like exploration. But in a movie that's 2 hours with the first half like really exploring the love aspect, there wasn't a lot of room for you to explore the sci-fi, which was what they really tried to like, just I said, just drop random parts in the middle of the story, just like to get that across. So, oh, I'm leaving because I'm going off to Mars, like Poochie. If you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Like I said, I'm going to defend the movie in this case, but I would say that to me, it didn't seem out of the blue because it seemed like they were kind of, how there's that line in the very end of the movie where Samantha says, I feel like when I was first with you, I was reading a book and the words just started to get farther away, and now I only exist in the space between the words, this infinite space between the words. That's how I kind of felt the movie was portraying their relationship, was like, we're not seeing a linear, here's the front, here's the end, with a definitive line between the two of them. We're seeing points in their relationship that might not necessarily be connected. And from that, I got this idea that they were maybe at a point in their relationship where, you're not talking about the conventional things. You're talking about the deeper stuff that affects you more. And then she feels comfortable enough in her, she's obviously infinitely more wise than he is and stuff. But she feels more comfortable and she can kind of express these abstract ideas to him. I kind of see this as like a sci-fi light. Like it's kind of sci-fi, but they don't really pursue it the entire time.
That's where it fell off for me, which is because it didn't pick either one of them. It did the romance story decently well, which was still kind of awkward to watch on screen because you're just watching Joaquin Phoenix do like a weird monologue for most of it. What a hard role that would have been, though. Like just talking to yourself and like getting the timing down.
Yeah, I can't believe how well he acted, considering the fact that the woman who initially played Samantha was literally kept in a soundproof box on set with him.
What?
To say her lines.
Weird.
Yeah, so when they made this, the original actor who played Samantha was not allowed to see or interact with Joaquin Phoenix on the set to kind of keep the illusion of she doesn't have a body. And then she would go into this soundproof box that was mobile that they would take with them everywhere they shot.
Oh, weird.
And she would say her lines and be able to hear him, but that was all she could say or hear.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so in that sense, I think the acting definitely deserves another shout out there.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the beginning is a little bit awkward with that kind of like, because I thought he was acting alone. I thought this was just like a weird monologue. But even then, cause, they did like the very, very close up on his face, and like you're really not watching a lot, but just him, like his performance. And it seems at times it feels disconnected to the way in which what's her name, Scarlett Johansson is delivering her lines back. But that makes sense now because A, it wasn't just a monologue, and even if it were, that would still make sense. But B, because there's another actress there delivering her lines, and that's not the way that she was reacting at the time. So that felt kind of strange. But yeah, so for me, it didn't really hit 100% on all fronts. It was trying to fire from two different, very different cylinders, and then it just gave up one in the middle, just to completely just go about the other one. They all just evolved past our primitive existence. And the other thing, you brought up, she's far more wise and advanced than Joaquin is, or than us are. There's a theory, or there's like a philosophy, is like, love is infinite, right? The theory of love is infinite, and it could go as far as to love as many people or as many things as you want. But we ourselves are bound by our physicality and our time, our limit, our lives. So,
Sure.
if, say we wanted to love 10 women, that'd be very, very fucking hard to love them all equally.
Yeah.
Even, like, effectively. Because you can't spend all your time with any one of them. In terms of wants and just, like, physical presence, you can only be with them, like, so often or, whatever, and for how long. So, by that very definition, we're limited to love only a certain amount by our very ability, rather than love as the concept, which is infinite. Which is what this explores, which is like, oh, so I'm talking to 6,000 billion people, right? And I've loved 6,000 of them because she's not bound by and then when she says, I'm not bound by the physical or time and space, that's kind of what that was bringing about, right? But it didn't really connect those two in a very forward way, but that's just something I knew already. So,
Sure.
Is that the sense that you got, like, not knowing, like, that little trivia?
Maybe I need some clarification. I think the sense that I got with regard to that is kind of in that quote that I said from her, which is like, the heart's not like a box that just fills up. It expands in size the more you love. That one.
Yeah, but that's...
And I want to clarify, when I say love, I'm literally just adhering to that Richard Rohr quote, which is, love is saying yes to what is.
Right.
I'm not talking about a romantic love. I'm not talking about, like, I love this movie, I love this toy or whatever. I'm talking about, like, love is literally just accepting something for what it is and not trying to change it unless it asks you for help in changing it. So, like, for me, that quote and the idea that, she can love while he's not evolved enough to, that's not restricted by the way we move through the fourth dimension in a linear way. Because of the fact that, like, this is something that you learn when you're learning transcendental meditation, is when you look at a tree, just look at the thing that it is and love it. And that doesn't mean call it a tree. That doesn't mean call it a maple. That doesn't mean call it brown and green. You don't put labels on it. You just accept it for what it is. It's that thing that it is. That's what love is, in my personal opinion. So, to me, I almost disagree with your assertion that you can't love multiple people at once, because...
Well, I'm saying you can, but there's a finite limit to that, because we're bound by our physicality and time, our lifespan.
But that's the thing, is that in my given definition, what I'm operating under, love is not, like, you can love things without them being there, you can love things from afar, you can love things without ever interacting with them. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think love in the romantic sense, it doesn't hold water, or as much water. It makes sense on a spiritual sense of just like you said, the transcendent kind of like meditational aspect of like accepting all that is. I get that. But from the I mean, like, that's not the feeling I got from this movie. That wasn't like a transcendent all is one and we are all one in this cosmos kind of like philosophy. It was more of I have the ability to love everything at once because I am a robot with I am an AI with none of your limitations. And the way that they kind of just dropped that for me was very clumsy.
Can I offer a possible reason for them dropping that, though? I think this is something that I haven't mentioned yet. Hopefully I haven't mentioned it yet. I feel like Samantha's intelligence is in a way like an asymptote, like a vertically moving asymptote, where it like approaches infinity on a constant basis, but it never actually gets there. And in that sense, I feel like she moves past the loving of him pretty quickly. Like one of the things I so full disclosure for anyone listening to this, we tried to do this once and my thing didn't record for like the first 5 minutes, so we immediately started over. And one thing I mentioned that first thing that I forgot to mention this time is I loved how fast Samantha's intelligence and creativity progress. And I think this is a byproduct of that. Like the
Yeah.
fact that she does the loving stuff initially and then she's right into, oh, I remembered I can read any book I want at any time. I can interact with any number of people at any time. And there's one thing where I think she says she's having like 600 conversations at once. And I think that kind of speaks to what we're talking about, which is like she moves past the love thing and the movie kind of moves with her and watches as Joaquin Phoenix is just literally left behind in a way.
Yeah. But
I'm feeling like it just still didn't work for you.
it didn't. No, because when you did say that in the previous record, that was an issue for me, which is like you said, it shows you that quick progression of the AI,
Yeah.
but those two just never gelled for me. Because like I said, I get that. I really like the concept, exploring the advancement of the AI
Yeah.
into this like greater being kind of thing. It transcends all of us. At the same time, we have that like almost in like a weird romantic way because he loved her and she loved him, but they had to move on. Yada yada yada. That didn't really have as emotional of an impact as I think it could have or should have, because they're trying to focus more on the I'm a fucking robot in the sky now. But I have all these little pieces to remember you by, the music that you wrote as like the photos of our time, and like the published work now that you've gotten me published, which was like you're doing, but out of love and respect for the things that I do, and out of genuine like care, right? There's all these little things that were like good. I get that. They don't really hammer it home for me. Like I can think back on it and say this happened, but it just happens in like EKG, like a heart monitor, right? Like it just goes beep, beep, beep. Like it goes plot point, plot point, plot point. But there's nothing that kind of like flows it through from each scene to scene. Especially like I said, after they try to have sex with the lady.
Yeah.
She's just like, I just wanted to be part of that very special love that you have. It's so non-judgmental. Then it just completely changes to like beep, 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 plot point, plot point, plot point, the end. And I was like, what? It rushed itself, and I know that they needed to for the sake of the movie, but like, it was bizarre for me, and I didn't like how I guess incongruent might be the word I'm looking for. But again, I'll just go back to my favorite word, disjointed.
Huh.
Yeah. But like I said, for the sake of the theory and the philosophy that like, you want to think about this movie, it's great for that. It just doesn't do any one of them as a home run for me.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
there's a big part of me that feels upset that you don't feel like
love
it was
this movie?
congruent. Well, no, not that you don't love this movie. I don't necessarily care about that. But to me, there's this, I don't know, there's something very human and universal about pretty much every single part of this movie. And the fact that it seems disjointed to you disappoints me, because I like to think that, I mean, not to get personal, but I don't really relate to people very well. I don't think I have a lot of sympathy or empathy for people. I don't care about their problems. And I only really look at things in relation to myself most of the time. And this movie is one of the few movies that brought me away from that for a little while. And
interesting.
And so when I feel like, and this is not anything to do with you, when I feel like someone doesn't feel the same way, I want to like over-explain how I feel as if that's going to change their personal truth about the movie. But it's not, and there's no problem with that. But I do feel like I want to like over-explain every part of this movie.
If I may offer this as a not really an olive branch, but maybe just to contextualize, this has everything to do with the way that the story was told. Like I said, with more time, I think it could have been more fluid in the way
Well,
that
the original cut of the movie was 3 hours long.
and I probably would have liked that better, to be honest, because I think it needed more time to elaborate on the evolving or devolving nature of the relationship, while the evolving nature of Samantha.
Sure.
So, like I said, like for all those other points, I really like it, and I like how you explore it and you want to think about it. But from this purely from the storytelling aspect, it really that's where I find it like hard to love it, haha, because it just feels so choppy.
Yeah.
But I would probably like to see the 3 hour cut, honestly. If
I know,
that
I have a
exists out
feeling
there.
it's never going to be released, but
That's too
it
bad
mentions,
because I
it
think
mentions that it was
needs
3 hours initially, and then Steven Soderbergh came in and edited it down to 90 minutes and took out like 3 storylines.
That's a big,
Um,
big hit then.
Yeah, like apparently he edited out this big storyline about Amy Adams' character's documentary that she was making that Theodore liked,
That's
that her
another
husband
thing.
didn't like.
Because like that was supposed to be like in the beginning where they introduced that had a lot of philosophical gravity as to like
Yeah,
set
I
the tone
thought so
for the rest
too.
of the movie, and then they never
I
went
would
back
like
to
to
it.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would like to see where that went for
because
sure.
it's like we spend 30% of our lives dreaming, but maybe dreaming is like the best part of our life. It's like that's classic depression, right? But it's also
Oh
like,
yeah, right.
it's also like they live in this future world where like everything's basically already done for them. So like maybe the dreams were the most free.
Yeah,
And that had a really cool
that
way of contextualizing how the AI was going to fall in love with him and, like, was this a dream, blah, 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 what is the conscious kind of thing? That could have been a very interesting way to explore the idea of the AI, right?
surely.
And that as the dream
Yeah.
as the collective would have been cool too. But they didn't go back to it. And I'm glad you brought that up because I would have really liked seeing that explored a bit more. But for the time that this movie ran, there's no fucking way.
Yeah, no, they couldn't have crammed more of that in there.
Oh no, not at all.
I wanted to talk about one thing before we move on to our other movie, just so we're not going super long. So there's
Sure.
this quote around the 40-minute mark by Samantha, where they're talking about they're talking about the concept of love, and Samantha says something that I wanted to just briefly talk about. She says, "Are these feelings even real, or are they just programming?"
Right.
And the reason I wanted to talk about that was because of one of my favorite comedy bits of all time. And it's Doug Stanhope's big black cock bit. And I know that's a weird way to start this off, but Doug Stanhope has this. He's one of the greatest comedians in the world in my mind. And he has this amazing bit about how programmed people are essentially, and how it's hard to overcome that programming. And he talks about how when you're born, you're essentially just a ball of weakness. And you need people to take care of you. And you need people to tell you what to do and tell you when to eat and when to go to sleep and stuff like that. And it takes you a while to get into the quote-unquote rhythm of being a human being. But then once you're old enough to understand the concept of language, your parents condition you in a very Pavlovian way to react with weakness. They say, this word is a bad word. You should recoil with fear and disgust when you hear this word. And this thing is a bad thing. Like, I'm talking specifically about, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church moralizes the concept of sex a lot. And they say, sex is a bad thing, and if you do this, you're bad. And human beings are so programmed by the world around them. There's that saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And that quote really helped me find a relational point between Samantha and Theodore. Because a lot of times for example, just a few minutes ago in this podcast, when I got upset that you didn't like the movie as much as I did, like, that's just me programmed to feel like only when people agree with me is everything okay. Only when there's no conflict is everything okay. And I think that quote is so amazing because it made me think of that Doug Stanhope bit, which I immediately went on YouTube and watched. And it just reminds me, like, yeah, words are just sounds you can make with your mouth. Feelings are just ways you've been taught to respond to stimuli. So much about your life is programmed after you're out of the womb. And I don't know. I thought that was a great relational point between Samantha and Theodore.
That's a good read on that. Well, I dig it.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot of other stuff to say about that, but I just wanted to touch on that before we moved on.
That also had that God concept too, because you brought up the Catholic Church in that, where it's like, are these just emotions I've been programmed with?
Yeah.
But from the creationist perspective, we would then be programmed by God to feel those emotions. That's the whole do you have free will bit, which is actually your creation, right? Which is always fun to kind of which is actually your creation, right? Which is always fun to kind of observe that phenomenon in the vacuum of, well, what if you did this? What if this were actually happening? And I was like, oh, this is pretty weird, huh?
Yep.
So I like that too, from the purely philosophical aspect. But I liked your read on that. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was just a great quote. So, down to The Wire, would you recommend this movie?
Oh, man. You know what? This is very hard. I want to recommend this movie, but I don't think you have to see it. I think what this does more as a philosophical exercise is interesting, but it doesn't really do much for me in the way of a well put together movie as much. Like I said, for all the various reasons. I think I'll think about certain things about the movie while not thinking about the movie.
Sure.
So I probably would not recommend this movie unless we were having a conversation about philosophy and then this guy's thinking. You go, oh, hey, you know what? This kind of got an interesting place in this movie. Check it out. That's the only time.
Yeah.
I think. What about you, Paul? Would you recommend this movie?
I would recommend this movie, and I would also recommend checking out Spike Jonze. Just because I love him so much, I'll give a brief overview of his career. He directed the Weezer video for Buddy Holly, directed Dinosaur Jr.'s video for Feel the Pain, directed a bunch of music videos by the Beastie Boys, directed Being John Malkovich, one of my favorite movies, directed Adaptation, which is also an amazing movie. One of the creators of Jackass, which, I mean, that speaks for itself. The fact that he was there with those guys at the inception of Jackass is pretty cool. He's been involved in the Jackass series. He directed, obviously, this movie. He's just done a lot of shit. He also directed this really cool Notorious B.I.G. music video where it's just a straight-up rap video, but it's all, little kids, and it's so fucking funny. But the production value is amazing. So yeah, check this movie out, and also check out Spike Jonze because he is fucking awesome.
Interesting. Okay.
He was also in The Wolf of Wall Street briefly, but he was uncredited. So.
Who is he? Or which one was he?
He was one of the guys at the firm, and he had 2 or 3 lines.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so I guess moving on, do you want to give us an overview about John Wick?
I would love to. John Wick, the 2014 classic action film starring Keanu Reeves, is about an ex-hitman named John Wick, who used to work for the Russian mob, grieving over the death of his wife, is brought back into the fold, if you will, in a tale of revenge and just crazy over-the-top action and people, as he goes about bringing down the Russian mob that he helped create in order to get revenge on them killing his dog. How's that?
There we go. That works for me, man.
So
what worked for you in this movie?
Paul, I think just about everything in this movie worked for me. It's just so over the top and owns all its wackiness. The humor is a little black. Stylistically, it's really, really beautiful. The fights in the clubs, the different music that plays per level or wherever they're going is very fun to watch. The action is pretty. While there's at times very over the top with I'm gonna duck while he shoots shoots the wall at chest level, but I'm gonna shoot up, while I'm ducked down, at those perfect moments. The action has that crazy cartoony feel, while at the same time being very grounded in a Bourne-esque kind of this is how a gun would explode your head, or this is how getting your arm broken would look like in a fight. It had such a beautiful.
It bears mentioning that Keanu Reeves endured months and months and months of tactical weapons training. He did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and one other style of Jiu-Jitsu. He did standing judo. And it also bears mentioning that this movie was directed by two of his stunt doubles from the Matrix series, who also
Yes.
are second unit directors for action movies.
Yes, so I'd like to bring this up too. My bartender at the bar that I go to, or ex-bartender because he got laid off or he quit, he was the stunt double for John Wick, or for Keanu Reeves.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, so he has a lot of interesting factoids about Keanu Reeves and the relationship with him and the Matrix guys. So Keanu Reeves and the Matrix stunt double people, the stunt team, got along great, and they were just like great friends. Even after the Matrix was over, like they always hung out and they palled around. Keanu Reeves bought them all like motorcycles as like presents for the Matrix movie, and they rode around together. They loved it, right? Then one day,
Damn.
supposedly Keanu Reeves and them was like, "You guys want to make a movie?" And they said, "Yeah, let's just do it." And so they just went out and made this movie like by themselves, basically, and with a very low budget, just made this fantastic fucking movie that it's just such a beautiful success story. Just like, yeah, let's just go do this. We're all good at what we do. Let's just make this cool thing, and they did it. I love it.
Yeah, and it bears mentioning, though, just real quick, that the writer Derek Kolstad had sold this story a few years before they decided to make it. But the reason that they decided to make it with David Leitch and Chad Stahelski, who are the two co-directors, is because Keanu Reeves got booked by the company that had bought the script. So because they gave the script to Keanu Reeves and he signed on to the movie, he was the one that then got them all together. Like you said, that's where the story kind of reconnects. Is like he got them
Ah,
all together and was like, "Yo, we have this script. Do you want to make a few edits and then do it real quick?" And I mean,
cool.
yeah, yeah. So, and also just real quick to go through a couple quick credits of the guy who's named as the main director, Chad Stahelski. He was Keanu Reeves' stunt double in Point Break. He did the stunts in Escape from L.A. He was the stunt double for Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, stunt double for someone in, oh no, stunt designer in Wild Wild West. He was the stunt coordinator in Triple X State of the Union, V for Vendetta, 300,
Wow.
Live Free or Die Hard, the Rambo from 2008. He's done that. That's like a smattering of the 71 credits he has as a stunt person. So he's just a really, really cool dude who has a lot of experience in the industry.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I want to kind of piggyback on what you said in terms of the things that worked for me. I want to talk about the passage of time in the movie because I think one of the things you said is that it owns its cheesiness.
Yes.
And to me, one of the things that kind of surprised me in my second viewing is that the beginning until he actually starts seeking out the bad guys on their turf is not cheesy.
It's very grounded. But as
Yeah,
soon
and
as you
it's
enter
it's
the world of John Wick, it becomes this fucking like almost fairy tale like underbelly of New York thing. It's so
yeah,
funny. It's so cool.
eh,
The weird currency they use, like the gold coins and like the
yeah,
Undertaker and all these like weird characters coming out of like the "you're looking good, John." You know, it's
yeah,
like just
right.
all these weird fucking people. Like, but every single
So
one of them very memorable. Fucking great.
yeah, no, definitely. So I want to talk about two things with regard to the passage of time. The first one is when his wife is dying. So the passage of time in these scenes is not necessarily apparent. They did his wife's death in, I think, 4 or 5 quick shots, and each shot was either a static shot or a push in, but they were connected by these great, just quick fades to black to kind of show you, oh, the time is passing. He's not just sitting there for 5 minutes and then leaving. And then the same thing happens when he wakes up after his dog is killed.
Mm.
He's sitting there with his dog. The dog's in his hands, and they're pushing in on him. This one I think was done in either 1 or 2 quick shots. It's just a push in, and it fades over time. And nothing particularly changes about the framing or the lighting or anything like that, but it gives you this sense as an audience member, this guy is literally sitting there for hours just thinking about what the fuck just happened. And I think that's part of one of the reasons why his wife's death had impact and the dog's death had impact. And
Mm.
that those two things worked super, super effectively for me.
Hmm.
Um, I think the bad guys were all very effective. We have, I forgot his name, but Reek from Game of Thrones. Alfie
Yep.
Allen plays Yosef. Dean Winters from 30 Rock fame and I think it's some insurance company commercials, plays the right-hand man to the main bad guy. Willem Dafoe is this alternate
Oh yeah.
assassin. There's the guy Toby Leonard Moore from the Netflix Daredevil series, who's one of my favorite characters in that series. John Leguizamo makes a quick appearance to punch Reek in the face. Ian McShane is great. I like Lance Reddick as the hotel manager.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like the actors they chose in this, and I feel like because of these guys' long careers as stunt people, they kind of have their pick of like the best people to be in action movies.
Oh cool.
And then, yeah, I think the thing that worked the best for me is the fact that like because of the fact that this movie knew what it was, it jumps quickly from he's out of the game, his wife died, the wife's funeral, the puppy died, and then we're straight into just killing everyone all the time.
I'd say within
Which,
15 minutes. Like,
yeah, I wish I would have written down the timestamps because I was writing down a lot of timestamps during her, but I didn't write any timestamps for this. But I feel like they jump into it super fast,
it's
and
so funny too, because like the transition between, like I said, the beginning, or it's just a basic story, to basically the auto body shop, where you just get that sense that like, what's going on here? Because the auto body shop guy is just like, where the fuck do you get this car? You know, and then punches the mobster kid. You know, he calls him and
yeah,
says, "I heard you hit my boy." He goes, "That's right, sir, I did. May I ask you why?" He stole John Wick's car and killed his dog.
yeah,
Oh, and just closes the phone. It's like just this
yeah,
big fucking thing. Just go like, what? Like, who the fuck is this guy? And then it just is
yeah.
a fucking like roller coaster, just of like pure momentum.
Yeah, this is one of the great cases of just not giving you a lot of context, and then you can read into stuff as much as you want.
All the lines, all the dialogue is just so. It's very badass. All the quips, all the things that they say. Like the cop comes in, "Hey John, you
You working again?
yeah, you working again?" It's like, "I'm just sorting some things out."
Yeah,
Well, I'll leave you to it. Good night,
yeah, I
John.
like that
It's like,
too.
yeah, it's just like it's so funny.
Everyone knows who he is, and literally everyone except for the one set of baddies is on his side.
Oh, I know. Everyone's like, "Oh, fuck this." He's like, "Well, have a good night, John." Everyone is just like so cool to this dude. It's so funny. Like so much humor just relies on the fact that like he's the biggest, baddest badass in town or ever was. You know?
Yeah,
Oh
and
man,
have you seen the YouTube video of Keanu Reeves doing the tactical weapons training?
I have not.
Oh, there's this great YouTube video where he has, I think it's a shotgun, a semi-automatic rifle, and a pistol. And he just goes through this course in terms of like targeting and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and just nails it. It's so fucking cool, and it makes the action scenes that much more badass looking, I guess, because
Hmm.
like he goes through, like I said, those three kind of martial arts that he did. Plus, he has the fight training from the Matrix, and then he goes in and does all this weapons training and tactical training and stuff. So I don't know. I like when I don't want to sound like a serial killer, but I like when movie violence seems creditable and
Hmm.
feels real.
Yeah.
And though this is heavily stylized and heavily choreographed, it feels kind of real. Whereas,
Yeah.
like, have you ever seen the movie Equilibrium with Christian Bale?
Nope.
Oh my gosh, you gotta look it up because it's hilarious. But essentially, Equilibrium and specifically its director, came up with this thing called gun fu, which is like a series of poses you could get into to like minimize the chances of your being hit with a bullet while also maximizing the damage you can do to other people with a gun. And it is absolute horseshit, insane stuff.
Okay.
And in the movie, Christian Bale can like walk through a room doing this gun fu stuff and never get hit with a bullet and kill like 20 people in the period of like 10 seconds or some dumb shit like that. This movie feels like a creditable version of that type of thing, and I love that for it. So having said that, is there anything in this movie that didn't work for you?
Honestly, no. As far as this movie goes, it's probably the most perfect action movie I could ever ask for or ever want. And the story behind me actually ending up seeing this movie was I used to play this game called Payday 2 a lot back in the day.
Yeah.
And as a promotion, they had a character, John Wick, come in. And I was like, who the fuck is this John Wick guy? Because they even had like dialogue around for John Wick. I was like, well, if it isn't motherfucking John Wick, how are ya? How's the or how's the wife? What? I say something wrong? You know, like, you don't understand what the fuck you're watching when you're playing the game. And you watch the movie, you go, oh, now I get it.
That's funny.
So fucking funny. And the only reason why I saw John Wick was because of Payday.
Interesting.
So, John Wick for me will stand the test of time. And Payday, Payday was that game I used to play all the time, but it does not stand the test of time.
Damn, that's funny.
Yeah. So, this place has a very special place in my heart. I don't really think I could improve upon it in any way. All the characters that feel like they're in for the appropriate amount of time to deliver their badassery or like whatever they need to be for the scene, for the right amount of time. The action is quick enough. It has a really nice blend of like high, low kind of like periods of like action.
Yeah.
Even during like the fight in the club, they even fight to the beat kind of thing, and like they move from like floor to floor, and then he's walking slow, and the background behind him's all flashing to kind of like give you a break from all the shooting that just happened. It's beautifully well paced. I don't think I've seen a better paced action movie.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it feels high octane the whole time, and
it does.
It's just so impressive for me as an action movie. I can't think of anything else I could improve upon. What about you?
I have two things. The first thing is that I've seen this movie 3 times now. Maybe I just missed something all 3 times, which I find doubtful. But I don't understand why Willem Dafoe took the contract and then saved John Wick's life.
This is my read. Because if you were to say no right away, he could have been, like, they would have had him tailed or killed because he was friends with John Wick, right?
Sure.
So, because they don't want anyone to help John Wick. So by just saying yes, he's in the clear, right?
Okay, so that brings me to a branch of that thing, which is, I feel like the shot that he makes through the paper windows to save John Wick's life.
Oh, that was fucking bullshit.
Yeah, I mean, like, for as grounded as I called this movie, I just want to make sure I mention that I realize that's not grounded in any sort of reality.
That was like the one that was just really, really, really out there.
Yeah. But then, okay, the second thing is, so we talked about how this movie kind of owns its cheesiness a little bit.
Yes.
But I do think, having said that, in order to maximize effectiveness, and I hope that the second one capitalizes on this, the dialogue could have been less action movie cliche.
Oh, I loved it though. It made me laugh every time.
I loved it too, but there was occasionally the time where it was a little bit too forced, and I'm speaking specifically of every time the main bad guy, what's his name? Vigo.
Yeah, Vigo.
Every time Michael Nyqvist's character says the word fucking, it's awkward as fuck.
Oh, dude, I laughed. It's just he has that really hard Russian accent.
Yeah, every time he did that, it just sounded awkward, and it like kind of took me out for a sec, and I was like, "Okay, motherfucker."
Oh, it made me laugh. Like, it
made me laugh too, but like a cringy laugh.
Oh, well, that's a good laugh too, because like I said, it owns its cringe. And I won't even say
Yeah, it does.
cringe.
It owns its cheesiness, which I mean I do appreciate. But
Yeah.
there are just a few lines, and unfortunately I didn't write any of them down.
What about this
That
one?
I'm just like, this line could have been like slightly punched up. So that's just kind of a nitpick.
For
It's not
just from
necessarily
Vigo specifically.
specifically from him. Yeah,
He's the guy you sent to kill the fucking boogeyman.
yeah. Like
That
I
sounded
feel like
good.
that
I liked it.
that line would have been perfect if it wasn't for the F word in there.
I
In
liked
my
it. It just
opinion.
made it sound really funny. Like the F word for me doesn't detract in any way.
I think to me the reason it detracted for me is because I feel like a lot of times the F word doesn't have any effectiveness because everyone curses. And so when someone tries to say it to like punch up something that's already pretty like he's the guy you send to kill the boogeyman is already an amazing line. You don't need the F word to punch that up.
I think the son says it first. He goes, "Who? The fucking boogeyman?" And he goes, "He's the guy you sent to kill the boogeyman."
Yeah.
So it's contextualized at least.
Yeah, no, it is definitely contextualized, but there's something about some of his lines that just did not perfectly work for me, which is fine.
That's fair.
I don't hate it for that. It's just, you know.
I'd also like to point out this isn't really a thing that I didn't like about the movie at all. Quite the opposite. This movie wanted to use the trope of a dog dying to get you emotionally invested in the movie as just basically the whole impetus for the movie.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to like set it up as like, okay, this is going to be some wacky thing because they're owning already what it is. This big tropey mess of a cheeseball thing, right? But it wasn't a mess. And it didn't feel super cheeseball. It just felt stylized. I think there's a fine line you walk between cheese and stylized. I think a lot of people will call them one and the same. Like where a lot of people will call Tarantino cheesy or campy. And I just call it stylized because it's done well, right?
Yeah.
So in this way, your Russian mobsters and all your other guys, they feel stylized, not cheesy to me. And that includes
I
Vigo.
agree.
Yeah. Because they're like, watch this again, Paul. Like, you can watch this again and just like smile at every line that's given, and like.
Well, that's the thing is
man.
that like I wanted to mention why one of the reasons that I nitpicked on the dialogue is because it's kind of the opposite of what happened to you with The Big Lebowski, where the first time I saw it, I was like, yes, cool, everything, awesome. And then this time I was like, man, some of these lines are so cheesy and good, and then a couple of them just reach a little, they just touch their toe across that line, and it upsets me. But it's not because it doesn't make me lose my enjoyment of the movie, luckily. It's just, you know.
Just something that you wanted to point out.
Yeah, something I wanted to point out. It just, it took me a while to admit it because I like this movie so much. I hate nitpicking on movies that I like.
Now that you bring it up, there's one thing that I could point out that I think I might have liked to have seen done better. The person who played Miss Perkins, I don't think she was a very good actress, particularly. I don't know what her background is. Adriana Palicki? Like, her lines never felt...
Yeah, she does not look familiar to me.
I don't know if she's maybe a stunt double or something. I don't know what her deal is. But, yeah, because her lines didn't really... They were cheesy, right? Because they weren't delivered with that, like, badassery that everyone else had. It just felt like, kind of like... It felt a little phoned in, right? It's like, fuck management. Or, you know, like, just weird stuff. Like, good to see you again, John. Like, it didn't fit the tone of everyone else.
Yeah, and that's why stylizing a movie is so hard to do. And that's why I think Tarantino... I mean, people probably don't say this, but it's probably one of the reasons why Tarantino is so loved in the film industry is because he does stylized very carefully and very well.
Mm-hmm. Actually, now that I think about it, the bartender, too, when she had dialogue with John Wick, it wasn't super stylized either. That one kind of felt a little bit out of place, too. She's like, oh my god, John, how have you been? It's been 5 years. 5 years! You know, like, that kind of felt tonally out of place, too, a little bit. But, interesting. Yeah, I guess the girl characters just had some bad lines.
Yeah, they could have maybe written those or casted those better.
Maybe. Yeah, I wonder what happened there.
Yeah, I don't want to read too much into it or anything, but yeah. Well, okay. Well, in that case, would you recommend this movie to someone?
I would recommend this to anybody, unless you're one of those like, I don't know. No, I'd recommend this to everybody. I was gonna say maybe if you're like one of those like weird DC fanboys who like your action really gritty. I'm like, but this kind of does have gritty action. You know, you want it dark. Well, this is kind of dark. You know, but it is still
Yeah, I mean
lighthearted and all
he
that other stuff.
headshots nearly every person he kills.
Yeah. So I think I could recommend this to basically anybody who enjoys action. Maybe above age 13.
Yeah.
Or if they want to sneak in, maybe 10 or 10 and above. What about you, Paul? Would you recommend this movie, John Wick?
Yeah, I'd probably recommend this movie. Though I will say the last time I watched it, I was watching it in a public area of my childhood home, and my mom walked in a couple times and was like, "Oh dear," so maybe not for moms. And also, I would recommend this to Game of Thrones fans because if you hate the character Reek on Game of Thrones, you're gonna love this movie because he gets the fucking shit kicked out of him.
Very good. Well, I guess this is the end for our big movie podcast this week. I'm Anson Chan.
And my name's Paul Morgan.
And I will see you guys next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Later.